3, 2, 1.
Where we got to, sorry, so we had a little bit of an interruption there. So I think we were talking about you just, the email had gone into the newspaper, into the Observer. I think that's what we were talking about, and how you were very anxious, and and then they were starting to interview at work. I think that's what we were talking about.
Oh yeah, and also my husband saying, comforting me and saying not to say anything. But when after my denial, where I sort of said no, I had nothing to do with it, on the Tuesday, that night, I had a terrible night. I was completely overwhelmed by anxiety and guilt that I was, throwing up and running to the loo. It was like a complete stress out situation. And I thought on the Wednesday when I woke up after a very restless night, I was thinking, well, what should I do? What should I do? And I called in sick, thinking, I can't possibly face going in like this. But then after I'd called in sick, I thought, well, what am I supposed to do? Carry on calling in sick day after day after day? And I thought, I can't carry on like this. I have to basically bite the bullet and see what the result is. So in the end, I told my husband, I'm going to go and tell them what's what. I can't not tell them because I'm just going to collapse. And so I went into work and I told my boss. And then, the whole rigmarole started. They took me to be interviewed by the GCHQ staff for human resources.
Right.
And then while they waited for Special Branch to come down from London, and they came down, as fast as they could to Cheltenham. And meanwhile, I'd been taken into police custody and put in the cells while they searched our house. And so my husband, who got called by my manager to say, oh, I'm very sorry, but your wife has been taken into police custody. He went back to the house and was arrived when the police had descended and they were searching through everything. And so he immediately hop skipped and got out of the way and went to stay at a friend's house. And he kept trying to come and visit me at the police station, but they kept saying, oh, not now, not now, not now, until 8 o'clock in the evening. And finally they allowed him in to see me. And he brought me some warm clothes, and because it was, March, it was still cold, and a bottle of water and some biscuits. And basically we were talking to each other through this glass screen, and he was close to tears. And I immediately thought, okay, I can't cry because I don't want to upset him more. So I just said, it's okay, I'm fine, don't worry, I'll be out tomorrow, everything will be. And so that, that was every time, like when I saw the film and that scene came up, it immediately choked me up again. And the same as my husband, it choked him up because that memory was so profound. And then the next day finally I got the interview within the 24-hour mark, with the Special Branch detective. And, I told him everything except for the name of the person who I handed it to. And that was it. They said, okay, we're going to release you on bail, but, you're on suspicion of breaking the Official Secrets Act, even though I'd confessed. But they said, we're not going to charge you just yet. So everything is just wait and see. So I was on bail for 8 months, and they kept rebailing and rebailing and rebailing me, because afterwards I discovered from somebody inside who suspected that the whole process of keeping me on bail was just to make it more intolerable for me.
Yeah, it's a well-known tactic that I've learned because of all my lockdown activism, unfortunately, Catherine. I mean, to drag things out, to try and stress you out and wear you down. I went through similar with my court cases. So, yeah,
Yeah.
all tactics that they use. Yeah.
Mm.
So,
And
the 8 months went by, and
I tried to get on with life as normal as I could. It was very difficult. I was no longer able to really meet up with friends, because all of my friends were from GCHQ at the time. I didn't know anybody outside of GCHQ in Cheltenham. I hadn't the faintest idea of anybody outside of GCHQ. And so it was difficult.
how did your family, not your husband, obviously very supportive by the sound of it, how did your family take it? Were they?
Well, my parents were in Taiwan throughout virtually the whole process, except for the summer, because they come back in the summer holidays. So they spent time with me during the summer, and my mum did come up with me to London, and she did meet the Liberty lawyers and so on. But right at the beginning, when I initially admitted to having leaked it, that was on a Wednesday. Now, my dad had actually read the article online that Sunday.
Right.
And I remember, and he's told me that when he read it, he said to my mum, who was in the other room, he said, dear God, Jan, come and look at this article. Isn't this shocking? And so, she read it and agreed with him that, the UN spying, the GCHQ and NSA spying on the UN in order to secure a vote allowing an invasion of Iraq. They thought it was, really, really shocking, and that, something should have been done about it. Of course, they had no idea that I had leaked
right.
it. And then on the Wednesday when I confessed, I didn't tell them. I didn't call them on that day because I wasn't sure. And then what I should say to them. And then on the Sunday, the Observer reported again that somebody had been arrested on suspicion. Now, Martin Bright, who was one of the journalists who had written the article for the Observer, he actually told me after, years after this, he said when the Observer had actually got confirmation that somebody had been arrested, they all whooped for joy.
That was in the film, wasn't it? Wasn't that seen in the film? Yeah.
And that's what happened, because it meant that they were 100% sure that it was a valid story and that there was a genuine whistleblower. And then, of course, they felt really guilty for whooping, but anyway, and then so they printed that somebody had been arrested on suspicion. And so again, my dad read this because he was a regular reader of The Guardian and The Observer online at the time. And I phoned them. I generally phoned them once a week on a Sunday. I phoned them and I said, I have something to tell you. And then I said, I've done something. I think I'm in a bit of bother, I said. A slight understatement.
Right.
And I can't remember exactly how it went now, but I said something about GCHQ and they knew it was something work related. Anyway, I think maybe they just put two and two together, and my dad said, is it anything to do with you, this? And I said, yes. So he said, well, I'm so proud of you, so proud.
Oh, bless Catherine, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure they must have been so proud of you. Yeah. Wow. It's good that as well, isn't it? It's good with your family are proud.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And
so
of course,
your
the first thing my mum wanted,
So sorry, your family were on board, they were supportive, your husband was understanding and supportive.
Yeah, everybody I knew was supportive.
So we just move forward. I mean, I could talk, I think both Martin and I could listen and talk to you all day, because it's so interesting to hear all this. But moving on to the court case there, because obviously it went to court.
Yeah.
If you can explain sort of as briefly what actually happened with the court case, because you obviously were not charged in the end. So,
well, first I went to the magistrate's
court.
not
convicted. Sorry, should I say?
Yeah.
You weren't convicted in the end.
Yeah. Well, first I went to the magistrate's court, but then the magistrate obviously felt that they couldn't deal with this case, so it went up to the Old Bailey, and when they decided they were going to charge me, it was just such a surprise, because, you know, we thought if they'd waited 8 months, maybe they just weren't going to bother, you know, but now, you know, obviously now we realize it was a tactic. So when they charged me, I immediately sort of went up to London and had meetings with the lawyers, and I just explained, I don't feel guilty, you know, I don't want to plead guilty. And they said, but, you know, there is no defense. There's no defense. We can't really defend you. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to plead guilty. I'm not guilty. I did the right thing. This is the moral thing to do. And they sort of, they understood, and they were trying to find a way to defend me. And they eventually, brilliant lawyers, but they said, look, we can quite possibly use this. It's a very slim chance, but this defense of necessity, and it's never been tested in a official secrets case, but, you know, there's a slim chance that the judge might allow it, and if the judge allows it, then that would be really the only defense we could use. And it just meant that I had leaked the information in order to protect lives. I felt, you know, I had to break the law in order for lives that were in imminent danger to be saved.
Yeah.
And so, you know, arguing that would have been quite tricky, but they were prepared to do it. And in order to do that, they said that they would need all, you know, the legal advice from the government, every scrap of legal advice that the government had up until that point. They wanted to see it. And, you know, all of this sort of building up towards a trial, I think the government got cold feet. I mean, I don't really know what they expected to happen, you know, by charging me. Perhaps they thought I would have pleaded guilty and then just tried to get mitigating circumstances and so on, and a reduced sentence.
Did they think you break down and not want to, you know?
Maybe. I mean, I think, you know, because there is no defense under the Official Secrets Act. I suppose people may find that they have no option but to plead guilty.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think this is like the case for David McBride, who is in prison in Australia now for having leaked information about war crimes committed by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan. And they literally prevented him from giving his evidence in court. He could present nothing, even though it was in public domain. He could not present any kind of defense. Now, at the moment, you know, I think in the UK you still could, because in theory, if I had, you know, it would have been a proper trial with 12 men and women of the jury. And the whole thing would have been a massive political trial. You know, in 2004, maybe going in, who knows how long it would have lasted. And right at the start, right before the 2005 general election, it would have put Tony Blair in the crosshairs of political and, you know, press coverage. And it was just, they suddenly probably thought, well, actually, this isn't how we wanted it to go. No. And it's going to look really bad for us.
Yeah. And you were prepared to put up a fight? I was
actually quite itching for a fight, you know. Even though I knew it would be very, very difficult on me and my
absolutely.
husband.
Especially
because he was an asylum seeker, you know.
So much admiration for you, really. I have to you know, up against that, to have that spirit to fight. So what happened? So when you went into the court, and obviously there's all that footage that was all over the news of you going into the court, and what happened? Did they reach? Did
they just
quite quickly?
They just sort of said they offered they had no evidence against me. They could offer no evidence against me, which was absurd because I'd confessed, you know. So they literally just shrugged and said, well, we're dropping the charges. And it was, I had known the night before, so it wasn't complete news to me, but we were just over the moon. The whole legal team, everybody was, you know, we went out for a meal and celebrated the night before. But really, I felt like they'd pulled the rug from underneath my feet in a way, you know, because I had prepared myself for it mentally and emotionally for this fight. And the legal team had done all that work, and they were prepared as well. And it felt like a damp squib, you know. It was sort of an anticlimax. And then all of those really pertinent issues about the legal advice, about the, you know, Downing Street memo, which hadn't come out at that point, where it was where they literally said they were fixing the intelligence around the policy, and all of these things which would have just nailed the Labour Party and, well, the Uni Party, because the Conservatives didn't oppose any of it. The Uni Party to the cross, to say you launched an illegal war. None of that came out until much later, until after the general election and Labour had got back in again. So
But obviously, and I totally understand you feeling sort of deflated and disappointed that you couldn't go further with that. But I'm sure everyone that's listening agrees with me. And if we look back to that time and fast forward to now, and obviously I'm going to finish on this in a moment as well, the situation we're moving into now with war. But even so, I feel, and I remember living through that time, I feel, I'm not saying we're completely there, we've got a long way to go. I think a lot more, especially younger generations now, are not, you know, are much more anti-war than they used to be. And I think people do question war a lot more now, and they know it's a corporate, you know, game and money making. You know, I hear, you know, I'm quite impressed by just how many people are aware of these things now, even if it's not enough. And I have to say, Katherine, I think as much as you may feel that at that time, I think what you did, and I'm sure everyone listening agrees with me, was part of that breaking it down, if you like, the truth. So thank you so much. I think what you did was an amazing thing for the journey to the truth in this country, well, around the world with war. And, you know, I hope you don't regret any of it. I hope you don't regret it.
No. Well, it was also the start of my own sort of growth and political awareness as well. You know, from that point onwards, it's just been a trajectory in the last 20 years of really, you know, my eyes becoming open to much more of what's going on and getting to the bottom of things, you know, wanting to get to the bottom of things always to really understand what's going on. So,
and on that point, because obviously I'm going to have to wrap up in a moment, but on that point, obviously we got in contact with each other, sort of know each other through social media with all its ills, puts us all together in these ways, which is amazing because of the lockdown.
Right.
And would you say that was also part of that journey where when we went into lockdown, did you just know straight away it was wrong? There was something up? Did it take you some time or?
Well, partly. So this also came about through my own gradual, you know, research into vaccines and so on. that was much later after this whole Iraq thing. But after I had my daughter, and then, I was researching whether childhood vaccines were safe and so on. And I just started to move away from the whole medical paradigm, allopathic model. And so when they started talking about, some pandemic or whatever, I was already very suspicious about any type of pandemic narrative, because I'd looked into previous sort of historical pandemics and how they weren't actually what they present them to be. They weren't genuine pandemics. They were something else altogether. And my research has gone even further beyond that now, where I completely reject everything, including viral theory and so on. So some people might think, oh, wow, she's a real quack, real conspiracy theorist. But, I have to say I've done a lot of research over the last 10 years into these things, and I'm convinced, and so I feel a lot more relaxed about these things myself. I don't panic over anything, basically. I just think, they use the fear tactic everywhere on everything. It's always fear driven, because people react to those things.
They do.
It's an emotive thing.
So war, to me it's all sort of wars in different, cultural wars on different levels. So obviously you blew the whistle on that, and that was about the Iraq war. But obviously, we've had this the last few years with the lockdowns and sort of taking our rights away, the restrictions, all these things coming down the line. And we're moving, as we talked about last week when we met up in London, we're moving, more closer and closer to, well, we are in a war. It's just that it's expanding, isn't it? What would you say to finish, after everything you've been through and what you've learned, and that you being so brave, to all the people listening who probably think, well, what can I do to stop what's happening? Because that's how people feel. I talk to people, what can we do? What would you say to them in terms of this world that we're living in at the moment? What can they do?
Well, I think, what you campaign on a lot, Debbie, is really one of the crucial things, which is to keep using cash. I think if people stop going along with everything, as in, oh, well, it's the convenient thing to do, it's the easiest thing to do. If you just resist that as much as possible, even if you have to pay more, spend more. For example, applying for a new passport, you can do it cheaper online, pay more to get it done through the post office, get it done through the post, make them work for it, make them do those jobs.
Do it the old-fashioned way.
And the same with, paying for stuff. Don't go to the machines, go to a human person, ask them to serve you. Don't go to shops where they don't take cash and only use apps. I mean, I was appalled when I finished that talk in London. My daughter was hungry, and we walked past a KFC, and it was the first time in ages, that she'd anything to eat like that. So we went into the KFC. I know it's terrible, but you couldn't even pay at the till. They had these stupid machines.
No, KFC are known for being, got
and
cash.
McDonald's, not that we ever eat in these places, but so many more places have these machines where you choose your food items.
Touch screen.
I would just flat out refuse to go to places like that. From now on, and just to be almost defiant, just be defiant. Just don't go along with it, don't agree to everything, don't give in so easily, just give them a hard time, and be an awkward bugger, basically.
Be awkward women. Awkward women, all of us. So just sort of non-compliance, because it's interesting that we're ending on that, because we had Piers on last week, bless him, as you've met Piers as well, Piers Corbyn, and it's exactly what he said. I said, Piers, what can we say to people about this world we're living at the moment, moving into a war? And he said exactly the same, Katherine. He said non-compliance, and also including in that boycotting, goods and services that are funding this, the genocide, more.
It is harder to do it that way because you know you have to find other things, you have to use different things, you have to pay a little bit extra sometimes, but you know this is the thing, they seduce people into doing what they want you to do. They wouldn't get their way if they had to browbeat people into it or bully, you know, just, you know, be horrible. Of course they don't. They're not that stupid. They seduce, and this is with the young people as well. They think, oh, this is great. This is, you know, so slick and cool and all the rest of it. It's a seduction process.
Yeah.
And just don't be seduced by it. That, you know, that's my final word on it.
And finally, I mean, I know we touched on that as well, about how technology's changed in the workplace. And if you're working somewhere, what would you say to people, though, in any workplace? You know, we've just gone through the lockdown and all that, whether it's NHS, a health setting, whether it was like you working in a government, intelligence services, government department. What would you say to people that are listening that come across information that if they shared it could change things? What would you say? And they're not sure what to do. What would you say to them? Because obviously a lot of people are going to be really scared, aren't they, about, I don't think I can do that, I can't. What would you say?
I think obviously it's every, you know, instance is an individual response. And I don't want anybody to have a really difficult time. But you know, there are ways and means. You can get in touch with Protect, which is a civil, well, it's a whistleblowing charity. And, you know, in terms of working in the civil service, not the intelligence service, but in the civil service, I think Protect are quite good. And they can give you advice on what you know, your legal things are. But really, you know, you do have to think hard about whether you can live with yourself not doing anything as well, because that ultimately will sit with you on your conscience. If you're somebody who, you know, if that issue is bothering you, then I suspect it would, if you do nothing, it would continue to sit on your conscience as something that you didn't act on.
Yeah.
So that's worth bearing in mind.
Really, really good advice, and the way you summed it up. Well, I'm going to have to end there, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on
Thank you, Debbie.
Our new podcast. I'm sure Martin feels the same. Absolute pleasure having you on. Absolutely fascinating to listen to you. And as I said to you in London, you are truly an inspiration. You're an inspirational woman. Thank you so much. You are, what I would say is, you are a role model. This is a role model. You know, we live in this age at the moment where the ridiculous role models that young people have, but you are to be a role model, what it means to be a human being, which is what it's all about at the moment with all the conflict.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Katherine. Anyway, I'm going to let you go because I know you've need to see your family, but thank you so much. Okay.
You're welcome. All right. Bye for now. Bye.
If Martin wants to say bye, but